Welcome again to American Zarathustra. This is Imperium Art, episode 22, with artist Jonathan Proby. We're very happy to have you here with us today, Jonathan. How are you?
Doing very well, all things considering. Doing well.
Crazy times we're in right now. It's November 5th, 2020. So for the historians looking back on this episode, yeah, they will see this as a crazy time. And also a quick introduction to my friend and co-host Nullus. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, and hello, everyone.
All right. So I discovered Jonathan's painting, I think around 2017. Us on the right wing here, we were flying high with Trump fever, and that our culture was really growing around that time. Things have changed tremendously since then. However, it was exciting to see new artists emerge online. And something specifically about John's work is he's a painter. And a lot of the work that he does is very symbolic. It has a lot of iconography, and I just find it very rich and fascinating. And I feel it's definitely time to give him a platform on the Imperium Art Show. So, Jonathan, you can find his work, by the way, at johnproby.com. As usual, there will be a link below, and you can see some of the pieces that we'll be chatting about today. So just to let the audience get to know you a little bit, Jonathan, if you could tell us about yourself as an artist. How did you get started in art, and let us know a little bit more about you.
All right, no problem. Well, I had been a visual artist for most of my life. I was doing art independently as a child. I was really into the commercial art world, as a lot of kids are, really into the comics and Sunday comics, as well as Marvel comics and cartoons and things like that. Like
Sure.
as I grew, I kind of figured that I would find myself in the world of either animation or game design or special effects or something like that.
Mhm.
So that kind of changed for me in college, because I actually went to college for a couple years before dropping out. And the college itself was for computer visual imaging. But
Ah,
while I was there, I had a spiritual awakening kind of,
hmm.
and it came from both starting to make music and from taking psychedelics, actually.
Hmm.
Uh,
I didn't know you were a musician. Is there anywhere people can find your music?
yeah, I have a Bandcamp. Raw Theory is my rap name, and I have several albums on Bandcamp.
No kidding.
One is Transcendental Mental
Hmm.
on my Raw Theory on Bandcamp. That's my main solo. But I took a break from visual art for 10 years and developed
Hmm.
music, produced and wrote. But
Hmm.
also it was like that I realized that I wasn't going to find any kind of real spiritual fulfillment in commercial art. I had realized in college, and
Right.
it was a drastic kind of realization, because it kind of sent me into the abyss as far as the planned kind of
Mm.
career path that America expects and provides.
Sure. How did psychedelics play a role in your awakening? What was the connection there?
Well, I was starting to rap, and I was starting to freestyle. And I don't know how much you guys have experienced it with freestyling, but when you cipher, you're having to pull words immediately and make sense of them. And that was happening while I was becoming I was starting to realize archetypal realities. I was starting to kind of put things together.
Mm.
Um, it was like it's part of it is just a maturation process of growing up, but
Yeah.
part of it also is just the inspiration that could come from that psychedelic world.
Hmm.
But like, I'm a much different person now than I
Yeah.
was in a major way. But that was it provided like an opening for me, you know. But since then, I've gone through innumerable evolutions, and where I find myself now is actually very different from where I've been my entire life, because I recently converted to Orthodox Christianity, and I've been an Orthodox Christian for the past 2 years.
It sounds like an amazing journey. Actually, a lot of it is parallel to my own in some way. So I can certainly understand and relate to your experience. I do feel like psychedelics are maybe good for people at a certain stage where they're just beginning to break an old mold and open their mind, but I also feel that it's kind of a jungle that people get lost in, and can be harmful as well if you don't have proper guidance. But definitely, it's just a caveat or a side there. But so as far as like going to school though, right? What was your experience with college? I mean, were you able in some way to just reject the whole monetary aspect of the arts and say, look, I'm not going to make money from the arts so that I can just use it more as a kind of a spiritual practice? What was your whole approach to that?
Well, like I said, I stopped making visual art because I realized how I was feeling and what I wanted to express. I didn't know how to express visually. Like, what the reality is that I needed to grow as a person far more before I could start to try and express my feelings properly in the visual medium, you know. That's what I realize now. And that's what was going on then. Because as I was having all of these spiritual, you know, growth and all this revelation, coming from the heathen world, but still, there is still truth to be found in the world with this, with the logos spermaticos. You know, there's truth because God is the fundamental for all things.
Right.
We can't stumble upon the truth, even if we are, you know, even if it's behind a veil somewhat, you know. So wait, what was I going with?
Well, I think just to respond to what you're saying, firstly, I always feel as an art teacher that, you know, when you're young, you should put a lot of time into practicing technique and absorbing other arts and art history, and then gathering life experience, travel, in your case, psychedelics, in other cases, you know, people have certain traumatic experiences that they draw from. But it's as if, when, you know, like, kind of like, I would say that not until maybe your 30s that you actually have something to say. You know, when you're young, like you're in the smorgasbord of life, the buffet of life, and you should just be experiencing life and building up, you know, your identity, your statement, etc. So I can see where you were coming from.
Yeah, and you're right about the technique, like starting to like building on fundamentals, because I went to an arts high school for 2 years for my 11th, 12th grade year, and then I went to this arts college for a couple of years. I dropped out, but then I exhausted all the community college life drawing courses that I could in my local area in Los Angeles, and you know that. So most of my background as far as actual instruction is in the realm of life drawing. I mean, I've taken a lot of different art classes when I was in high school and whatnot, and in college. But what stuck with me, what I excelled the most at, was always figure drawing. You know, and so that is the fun that forms the foundation of the art that I make today. So that's something.
This segues really well into my next question. I want to ask you to define art, but before we go there, I'm quite pleased to hear that you're really grounded in traditional Western art. I've produced a lot of content on my YouTube channel that's like anti-postmodernism, and I'm open to any kind of conversation about that. I've had fans say, "Hey, you know, why couldn't we have white identity postmodernism?" And I say, sure, you know, that somebody would want to do that. But so if you could maybe help us understand what your or not your definition, but the definition of art through your eyes.
Well, I mean, it's it's kind of a visual medium of expressing the spirit of the population ultimately,
Okay.
looking at where they are. And for me, I just as I've grown as a Christian now, the world of secular art has a way different meaning to me now than it did in the past.
Okay.
Like as I was growing and being instructed, I was very enamored with European art, Renaissance stuff, just the technique involved, the beauty of it all, the aesthetic, something to be admired, and but now, I spent years generating art that was, I guess you could classify it as fine art, but I was putting together symbols, archetypes to try and communicate a narrative, and, and all of them were kind of communicating where I was at the time. Actually, I feel like if you do look at my work and it was on a timeline, you could see how I was moving closer to Christianity as time went on.
That
but
is the narrative, I guess, of your work in some way.
yeah,
Mm.
I was trying to find my way back home.
I want to say to the audience, by the way, if they're listening to this and maybe open up a separate window and go to his website and, scroll through the gallery while we're talking, you'll see what he's saying. You'll see what he's talking about, be able to match it up with this conversation. I'll want to actually talk about a few pieces as well. But I find it interesting how you pointed out the difference between secular art and religious art. And I feel as if this is just my impression. I feel as if like art by nature has a spiritual quality to it, and that when it becomes secular, it I don't know how to say, but it loses something. It loses an authenticity, a humanity. I mean, that's a broad stroke right there, but I guess I'm just kind of relating to you in some regard. What was it that drew you to spiritual iconography in your work?
Well, it was the necessity of the church that I joined. I attend a Serbian Orthodox church here in Oakland, and when I was under the process of my conversion, learning about our theology and our history, I was kind of rebuked by a Catholic who asked me when was the last time I went to church, because I was on there starting to push Orthodox apologetics, right? So he was basically like, how can you say anything about our church when you don't even go to church? So how can you call yourself a Christian, right? And one thing in my life I kind of keep an eye on and am concerned about is hypocrisy in my own life. The more that I can do something about my own hypocrisy, the more worthy I am to speak on anyone else's, So I found the closest one I can get to on a bike here in Oakland, and I'm blessed enough to have the choice of several places, but this one happened to be a Serbian Orthodox church, and I got to know the parish and the father, and I was chrismated at that church about 6 months after me getting there. You're generally supposed to wait a year or even more, but I was encouraged actually by a German man, an older German man who had converted, and it was like, don't wait. If you know it's what you want to do, do it. I'm like,
that's amazing. Now, are you Serbian at all, or is there any
No.
ethnic connection? No. Okay.
I actually grew up in South Central Los Angeles. My mother was a single black mother, and my father was a Jewish man who was institutionalized his whole life with schizophrenia.
Holy God! Wow.
So I was actually conceived in an institution, a mental institution. My mom was fitted at the time with manic depressive bipolar.
That's heavy stuff. What, with that kind of background, how do I say, how did you get from there to white identity politics? I mean, I think for some people it's very obvious that it's connected to the Christian faith and American culture and these things. But what's your personal interest in white identity politics?
Well, for me, actually, this is very interesting for me because it feels like I've come full circle after the past 4 years, because I had seen the rise in this anti-white fervor, for a while, but it started to become quite blatant during the during Obama's reign, especially as it came to its end, and with the coming of Trump, it reached a crescendo, and then after his win, it just has spiraled into a complete psychosis, social psychosis.
Exactly.
And so obviously I could see these things, and I could see that it was unjust. So I wanted to speak out about it, and I would speak out about it. But I was associated with the Proud Boys. I was jumped into the Proud Boys actually by Gavin McInness at the only real Trump art show that went down the couple days before the election. And I shared a painting that was prophetic, really. It's called Rise of the Republic. You can find it on my website. Shortly after the election, relatively shortly after election, as the pressure mounted, Gavin he purged the Proud Boys of all white identitarians, and in that purge, I was pulled into a group of fascists and National Socialists, and I was faced with their arguments, right? And so, I don't lie to myself, and I'm not a dishonest person. So I dealt with their arguments, and they were making really good arguments. A lot of really good arguments, but I didn't agree with all of it. But I appreciated what kept me there was that I appreciated the attempt to defend their tribe. I did appreciate that. And my interest in it is really at this point, I'm not interested in it. I'm interested in the Christianization of America. I'm interested. I share your interest in empire, but my interest in empire is specifically Christian. Like at this point, I'm a Christian monarchist.
Right.
And a world that treats people as they should be treated, which is instructed to us through the Lord and through the church, and a world that is where the separation of church and state is not codified into the structure of our civilization, where we kind of come to grips with the fact that we have to have like our moral code comes from a person, not from an idea,
I want to bring Nullus into the conversation at this point, really, because I think this is something in Imperium art we have not yet covered, and the idea of Christian monarchy. And I think Nullus knows sort of where I'm going with this. You've covered a lot of points here, but I want to get Nullus's impression so far.
Well, first of all, it's a fascinating conversation so far, and I think before we start, we maybe for the audience's sake as well as for Jonathan's sake, we should define the concept of Imperium art a little bit clearly. What we're talking about with Imperium art is the contextualization of our collective, what we call the biospirit, the continuity of the European man from antiquity to today, including many different variations and iterations over the centuries. And one of our goals, or one of our ongoing topics, and again, we don't have everything clearly defined. This is an ongoing conversation. Things evolve as we learn, as we get critique from others. But one thing is clear, I think, and I believe Donald would agree with me on this, that one of the main points of Imperium art is to reconnect what we would call these severed lines in our continuity. And in my essay, I actually speak of, so there's an important question here, is the detachment of this continuity of ethnos and mythos from the divine. And so by placing the absolute in the hands of man, morality becomes malleable and loses meaning. And I address many of these questions in my essay on Imperium Art. So I find this conversation extremely fascinating.
Right on.
And so I'm what you would call a cradle Catholic. And so I understand the spiritual journey. When I was much younger, I was a lot more devout. And then in my late 20s, mid 20s, I kind of veered away from it. I never really repudiated it in any way, but I think that there was a period of in my life where I felt distant from God, even though I still identified it as a Catholic. I never really went to church. I never really took it seriously. And in the past few years, that's changed, and I'm on my own journey, finding my truth through my faith. So I find this very fascinating, and I encourage everyone again, that we all need to follow our calling, and we have to find our connection to the divine, because that brings us in and ties it all together with this whole idea that we're trying to achieve in Imperium Art. So I wholeheartedly agree with the journey. And again, whether one chooses to be Orthodox, or whether one, feels that the Roman Catholic path is their truth. And in our circles, we have people that identify with paganism. We have people that are Protestants of various denominations. And our goal in this is to find a consensus, points of synergy, where all of these different connections with the divine can converge, find points where we can connect on a level that we call the Imperium, if that makes sense. So in your understanding, the Imperium is the Imperium of God, and that makes sense to me personally. So I totally understand where you're going with that. And so, but for us, in terms of the Imperium, what we're trying to also achieve, and I maybe, Donald, if you don't mind, I'm just going in a little bit on a tangent, but I think it's important that in one of my past episodes, I have a poetry podcast with the White Art Collective that, and one of them I spoke about a Hungarian. My background, incidentally, is Hungarian, Jonathan, just so you know, and so there's the concept of the Boldog Asszony in Hungarian, which means the Holy Mother, the Great Mother. And this is a pagan concept that ultimately became the symbol of the Virgin Mary. And down the centuries, it's also become synonymous with Hungarian identity. So today, you could have a Hungarian, and there's many different religious songs that would. Sorry about that. There are many different religious songs that would celebrate the Boldog Asszony, the Virgin Mary, the Great Mother. Suffice it to say, this has such a respect that regardless of your particular denomination, whether one is Protestant, whether one is Catholic and Hungarian, and Protestant and Hungarian, or even some cases pagan and Hungarian, there will always be a respect for this particular symbol because it binds us all together. And so what I'm trying to say with this is that I think that through Imperium Art, we're trying to achieve this kind of a spiritual connection with each other. So I hope that made sense. I'm trying. I don't want to run off on a tangent too much.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand totally. And when in a world where tribes are competing and competing with each other, and some tribes are seeking to subvert others, where the Jewish ruling class is having its way, and slandering whites, and the issue though for me is that I don't feel like the reaction to it, as long as it's dialectical, it's always going to fail. And I don't feel like the reactionaries themselves understand the environment that they're in, because the environment that they're in is biblical. The role that the Jews play in the world is directly tied to that biblical reality and to this covenant that we share as Gentiles and Jews under God, right? So although I do sympathize with the need and the desire for defense against this onslaught. I have to stake my pole in the Orthodox Church, in our theology, in our worldview, really, because it's all encompassing. And like, for example, like I cannot venerate pagan gods. So if there was something going on where some kind of pagan veneration was happening in the space, I can't even be there if I was actually being a proper Christian, you know. But I can appreciate people wanting to develop a deeper kind of connection to themselves and the world, you know. But for me, all roads lead to the same place. Ultimately, it leads to Christ, and I feel it leads to the Orthodox Church, because what you were saying earlier about trying to reconnect these broken ties to the past, to your people, to your history, your legacy. I feel like the most significant severing happened during the Great Schism itself. And I mean, I'm not going to attempt to turn this interview into an apologetics discussion, because I don't know if you're ready for that, or even if I'm ready for that. But what I can't do is detach my faith from all of these other things, because it influences everything. Because I do care about white people, and I do care about Americans, but it's within the framework of my Christianity. You know, I'm supposed to care about them. I'm supposed to speak out against the injustices that are being thrown at your people, you know, because that's what God would have me do. That is the right thing to do. And even before my conversion, that was my motivation. Even when I was being exposed to esoteric Hitlerism and these other kind of like metaphysical extensions of this dialectic, I still held true to the fact that I was there for moral reasons. You know, I wasn't there to necessarily join these cults that have developed, you know, because ultimately that's what we as Orthodox see the world as being enveloped in, really, is all of these innovations and heresies and cults that have blossomed around ideologies, primarily in the 20th century and now in the 21st. You know, for us, what's happening in the world right now with the degeneracy, this like kind of rising tide of excess and degeneracy, is a manifestation of errors that have been plaguing our civilization, the West, for 1,000 years, for really over 1,000 years, but primarily 1,000 years. That's what, from what I've learned so far from becoming Orthodox, that is our perspective.
No, I totally appreciate that. And I also don't want to get into a theological debate. I mean, that's not, I think, the purpose of our show. We definitely have a lot. And I mean, I've had my share of discussions with Orthodox Christians on this. I have my position and I respect their position. Hopefully there will be a day when the two churches reunite. I think that deep down inside, everyone hopes that will eventually happen. Suffice it to say, yes, there are various forms of broken continuity over the centuries, and I think that that's something that we're trying to explore with Imperium art. We're trying to figure out where those connections were severed and how we can reconnect it through the art that we're expressing, because the goal ultimately is for us to find a path forward so that we can provide a picture of the future, so to speak, for future generations. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said amen. And I just wanted to just wrap up a prior point that I didn't get to finish, which was about the how I came to start making icons. Is specifically the church that I chose is very small. It was established 90 years ago here in Oakland. It used to be packed, but the modern world has eaten at that parish and the families that established it. So now when I go to the church, it's me and a handful of elders primarily. Some younger folks, Gen Xers, almost no young, really young, like Zoomers in there. very few no millennials really. So in a sense, the church is dying, but I'm glad that I'm there. And they had for those 90 years, they had prints of icons, which are actually kind of not supposed to do, but some people are just poorer than others. But they just had prints up there, and I offered to replace them.
Marvelous. Marvelous.
I did. Sorry to interrupt. I did have a question, though. I wanted to get back to really quickly in your earlier point, because I write poetry, and so my poetry is more structural and traditional style. Has your view of freestyle changed after your awakening, and would you consider your work, how would you consider your work in this genre?
Oh, as far as the stuff that I had done years ago, I mean, I still like my music, but the rhyme schemes, I was always very concerned with rhyme scheme and how much I could pack a sentence with syllables that kind of roll into one another. And so I had a lot of fun with that. But as far as the content of what I was saying, it's really cool. All of it was really metaphysical stuff. But there's certainly plenty of errors in it that I would see now as an Orthodox Christian. I was a Gnostic Marcionite heretic for 20 years, pretty much. Marcionism was one of the early heresies in the church where he deemed that the God of the Old and New Testament were different, and the Old Testament God was a meanie God, and the New Testament God was a nice God, and I was kind of on that Gnostic train. That's a Gnostic idea. It always kind of like collapses into Gnosticism, but I was on that train for a long time, and this kind of pulled me out of it, coming to the apologetics against Gnosticism, because that was one of the first things that we had to do battle with in the church.
Mm-hmm.
It's super fascinating stuff. I want to, honestly, I can tell that we could talk for hours about all kinds of stuff, but I want to try to give some context and form to the discussion within the show. So, Jonathan, your art and ideas in the context of the Western diaspora, or our future vision of an Imperium, it shows us a kind of the potential of a Christian monarchy as an answer that could be a healthy choice, a healthy vision to go towards. And I think this is a great opportunity for you to state that case. This show talks to people of every stripe within the dissident right. There's all kinds of different positions, and we try to be extremely objective and let everybody have a voice, everybody have a platform. I find you and your work very fascinating. You obviously are deeply, deeply committed to your spiritual journey. And so as for myself, what I first want to say, I also grew up devout Catholic. I went and studied Buddhism for 20 years or so, and I have my own story. But what I want to say is that I feel that the structure or the form of the church and the relationship of art as a spiritual technology within the church is an excellent model. And I feel that Imperium should also be that model, or use that model. Again, Christianity is really core to Western civilization. So rather than talking about whites, we could talk about, say, Westerners. And then there's a side conversation that I'd like to have with you about a project that I've been trying to start called the Western Alliance, which is essentially an alliance of biracial and people of color who want to preserve Western civilization by protecting whites. It's literally the inversion of what, say, Antifa and Black Lives Matter are, where they want to destroy whites, and destroy Western civilization, and make us the whole globo homo mishmash of non-identity consumers under one Zionist world government. So and that was a big mouthful right there, but
I'm following you.
Yeah. So let's go ahead.
As far as the art is concerned, I mean, I think that iconography is perfect for bridging this gap. Because, you know, as I was growing, I never understood what the deal was with Eastern icons. I never understood why they didn't look realistic. I was always enamored with the West because of the technical skill on display.
Sure.
And really that says a lot to the occulting of the East in the West. And a lot of that has to do with the Great Schism that went down. But yeah, a lot of the Byzantine world is an unknown, and only really within the 20th century and now being kind of like reintroduced to much of the West. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the icon itself it plays a key role in the liturgical worship. So it's a work of art for sure, but you know, they don't have signatures or anything. You know, the artist is it's kind of a sacrifice in a way. It's a sacrament, you know.
Oh yeah.
And
you know, that brings up a fascinating concept, because Eastern Orthodox art, and there's samples at your website of different saints. There's a really specific style of painting that has a kind of a flatness to it. It's very decorative, whereas say Western European art is almost like photorealistic. You have the Caravaggios and the, you know, the even you know, Goya and these people. There are other kinds, but it's much more realistic. And I think these are two kinds of Western sensibilities. For me, I get both of them, and I get the impact. I feel both of them. But I'm curious, what in your mind, both as a Christian and as an artist, is the difference between the sort of the flat, stylized, decorative Eastern Orthodox method of painting versus the sort of photorealistic Western European style?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like, well, for us, the imagery is a reflection of the theology, you know. So in Orthodoxy, we're seeking to conquer our passions, or rise beyond our passions, right? Mm-hmm. So the lack of sensuousness in the art is kind of a reflection of that. Mm-hmm. And also the fact that we're trying to not be of the world, but in the world. So when we simplify the figures and the environment, we're putting the focus more on the actions and the symbols that are there, you know.
Right.
And so, because when you look at that area of the world and Indo-European area where a lot of this manifested, the Byzantine Empire manifested, and this art manifested, the art was more realistic before the expansion of the Christian Empire. And as icons became more there became a style, you know, a style starting to emerge. They were more moving towards the Western realism thing, but it's the theology that put it in its place for us, you know, and it's about staying as consistent as we can with the tradition too. So we're not innovating. So the artist himself is not stamping himself onto the piece. Rather, he is being faithful to what is
iconography. Yeah. I have to say, it's fascinating, as somebody who studied Buddhist art for so long. This is, I don't know how to phrase this other than it's parallel to Buddhist art, or rather to Tibetan Buddhist art. So there's a almost a math as to how these paintings are to be put together, and of course the iconography, the flatness, the decorative quality. I just find that interesting on a kind of a psychological or on a human level. You know, what is it that makes people do that? But I think the point you're making here is that when it's less realistic, it's almost more idealistic, and therefore conveys ideas symbolically in a more direct and powerful way that maybe the imagination can process better. Whereas if we look at an exquisitely realistic painting of, you know, the agony of Christ or something, that's a different, it's almost theater in some kind of a sense. You're watching it rather than consuming it per se. Like, you're not putting it inside you in a symbolic way. So these are just interesting different ways of the technology of art as a form of like spiritual
Yeah, very much
reality.
so. And if you look at the first image of Christ around 400, I think it was 400. Was it 600? I could be getting that wrong, but I think it was 400, but it could be 600. But it's Christ Pantocrator. It's the most famous image of Christ. It came out of Egypt. It's the first image of him that's was ever made, and it's very realistic. It's very painterly, actually.
Okay.
And it's considered an Orthodox icon, and that image of him has been the image that all subsequent images of Christ have been based on. But you can see that's very realistic, you know. And I love that image, and I think that there's room for this that kind of application to icons. Some icons are far more detailed than others, and I'm new in this realm, you know, of writing, quote unquote, writing icons. So I've just been learning as I've been going, you know, like I made 2 icons for myself, kind of for practice, and then everyone I've made since then has been for my church specifically, and I'm very honored by that, because before this, you know, I was doing art that was very symbolic, very political, very esoteric, but there is no avenue for them in also very, you know, but right wing when I'm saying political, there's no avenue where I am to display these things, you know, in crazy California, Oakland, Bay Area. You know, but now I have all these pieces that are in this church that will remain in that church, you know, hopefully until God returns. So
That's beautiful. That's quite an honor. I'm sure you feel quite happy about that. If I can quickly do that aside, that I wanted to talk a tiny bit about the Western Alliance. For starters, how does that idea grab you? The idea of a kind of a faction of the dissident right for biracial and people of color who are trying to defend the West, and they understand, they're woke to the JQ, they understand what is really going on, like you do. And do you think that's an insane idea? Is it a hard sell? Is it something that we should put more time into?
I think there's definitely a need for that, you know. I'm not against something like that for sure. It's just yeah, I mean, I don't see an issue with it at all, you know. I mean, not everybody is a lunatic racist, you know, that hate white people. There should be voices out there that make that clear, for sure. But yeah, you know, I support it. I think it's good.
So let's move on with the questions here then. We haven't really covered your politics so much. I mean, I know you say that it's tied in. You've touched on it a bit, but I wonder if you could be a little more explicit about your politics as it relates to your art.
Oh, well, you know, I started making these icons about a year and a half ago, and I haven't made an original painting until the latest one that I just finished, and I've only been working on that the past few weeks. And even the one that I just finished, although it's not an icon, it's very liturgical. But so I haven't really delved into political art in a minute. I did a flurry of them during the first half of Trump's
right, which I think that's what got you on the radar with the dissident right, the alt-right, and they're well represented at your website as well. So when people go to your site, I realize this is a kind of a phase that you've passed through, you know, and you're in a different place right now.
I won't do anymore. You know, it's something I'll probably return to, but maybe in a different way. You know, we'll see.
Okay, so like there's some really wonderful devices in like Game of Souls, for example, with the chessboard. I think that's a pretty clear, you know, sort of black and white choice here. There, A Tale of Two Peoples, though, that covers that. I think I would call Imperium art, you know, because you're really covering the vast array of the Western experience. You know, from all the way back to Egypt, it looks in the image here. And then, of course, you're showing another kind of people in the lower half of the canvas, Do you want to talk about that painting a little bit?
Yeah. That painting I kind of consider my magnum opus for that period of my life, you know, it was like the culmination of years of growth and coming to grips with the JQ
Mm-hmm.
and where I stood with the Europeans and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that piece is owned by, so I sold that, so I don't own that anymore. And
Okay.
it allowed me to pick up a phone, which was great because I needed one. But it was hard to let go of because I put my heart and soul in that damn painting. But that painting is also where I was spiritually at that point. Like if I made something like that today, it would be more researched and better representative of where I'm coming from now. But yeah, I was showing, if I can let me pull it up so that I'm not fucking up my memory.
Yeah, certainly have a look. While you're doing that, I'll chat a little bit about it. I would say that very many people in the dissident right are at this place right now mentally, where they see the dichotomy of the Zionist Jewish cabal that has infiltrated and is sickening and killing Western civilization. The way that you've painted it in color on the top and then kind of in grays on the bottom, you've got the I forget what it's called. It's sort of like energy points on the body. It's part of symbolism.
The Kabbalistic tree of life at the bottom.
There it is, the tree of life. Yeah, and I mean, this opens up a massive can of worms, if you will, where there's so many questions. It's very much a very broad montage, I guess, of civilizations. But your choice of people here, you've got, Saul Alinsky, you've got Marx. I think I see Steven Spielberg. Is that him as well?
Spielberg's at the bottom. Edward Bernays.
Why did you choose those particular people for this piece?
Well, what I'm trying to show is like, because the piece is called "A Tale of Two Peoples." This piece was about representing the relationship between Europeans and Jews throughout the ages. That's what this is about.
Okay.
And I was not Orthodox yet, but yet I put the Russian Orthodox cross in the center of it, as you can see. So I was moving towards where I am now. You can see that. Okay. And in the middle of the piece, so I have all these notorious Jews at the bottom, basically notorious 20th century, late 19th century Jews that are responsible for the social engineering of the West, especially America, pretty much. Yeah. And above them, I have the Sanhedrin trial where Jesus was condemned by the Pharisees. And to the left above that, I have Jeremiah condemning the king of the Israelites. Jeremiah was an Israelite himself. And then to the right, I have
Is it Pharaoh?
I have no, it's not Pharaoh. I have Judah being rebuked by his brother Joseph.
Okay.
Joseph sold into slavery in Egypt, and
this is from the Old Testament, of course.
Yeah. Those two on the sides are Old Testament stories, but all of them, including the Sanhedrin trial, is a rebuke of the Jews, and the Jews basically choosing their path that is on the way towards the bottom of that painting, and choosing their occultism, their Kabbalism instead of their Messiah.
Yes.
And then, above them, I have these luminaries of the Western world, and the symbol, I have the blood and soil symbol. I forget the name of that rune specifically, but that's the blood and soil rune, and above that, the swastika,
I find it interesting that you put Andrew Jackson in there. Was there a specific reason for him?
Well, I'm kind of like, this is kind of like the movement of white civilization through time. And
okay, nice, beautifully done, very, very nice. Yeah, it's a really, really deep topic, a really deep painting, and to put all that information into one canvas is monolithic to even attempt. But I find it fascinating because it plugs back into your view of basically, I will say, like taking a Christian monarchy lens over Western civilization, looking at our relationship with the Jews as Westerners, and I ever wonder if there could be a positive relationship, not one that of which they're parasites of us. Um, and
Well,
Go on.
it's prophecy. Peter prophesied that they would convert ultimately. They would ultimately come back to God.
Mm-hmm.
None of us knows when that's going to be, but that is a prophecy in the New Testament. So, I mean, I do expect them to repent, but who knows when it's going to be. Like in the meantime, they just, we can't be fearful, and we can't be malicious, and we can't be full of spite and wrath. We have to be godly. We have to be righteous. We have to tell the truth with courage.
Yeah.
And and I think that actual position is represented perfectly through Christianity, through the Orthodox Church, through the history of our martyrs. We've sainted emperors, we've sainted soldiers and warriors.
Yeah. So advocating for outsiders that are listening to this conversation, I'm looking at it like, okay, here is a it's hard to really phrase this, but let's say here is an approach to the JQ and Imperium. And that the approach is a moral approach that's grounded in the Christian religion and in divinity, and it's one in which love is the answer. And as you know, in our world today, there's a great deal of anger, hatred, fear. We're in the thick of it right now. With the election, this is in a sense maybe one of the most critical times in the world history. If you think about this election and where it could go, the domino effect if one side wins over the other. So I feel that it's profound to have a look at the world through this lens. Again, I'm advocating for people who are not Christian to give this a reasonable chance and to kind of say, perhaps there's answers here, and we should investigate it, not look down on it, criticize it, etc. Again, the show is always very, very objective, and I think you and Nullus cover a tremendous amount of ground. So I'm just trying to throw something in here to bring some balance and to advocate for you and your ideas, because I feel like these are really, really beautiful ideas that we should take seriously. So I'm go on.
Well, I was just gonna say that that like I said before, that I consider myself a monarchist now, a Christian monarchist, and that's because the faith is about the rejection of dialectics. Dialectics are a product of philosophy, and they're a product of the world, and we're instructed that the wisdom of the world is foolishness, and this modern political scheme that we find ourselves in is a manifestation of this dialectic. It's made of man, and I think that it's like we are a civilization in rebellion against the concept of authority, so we've tried to disperse it in the very codification of our system. But in that dispersal, what we've given is the perfect environment for oligarchic control, where power comes from the shadows. And now we're seeing today, in the midst of this massive, most blatant criminal rigging of an election ever,
Right. Oh, God.
an unveiling of these shadowy figures as the flagrant technocracy that they are, the technocrats that they are. So
The globalists. Yeah.
I feel like this movement towards a Christian solution is something that is inevitable, just like what we're encountering right now is inevitable, because we see it as a product of ancient errors. And the thing about theological errors is that they snowball, they snowball within the fabric of your civilization until you end up with what we're looking at with clown world, I think.
Nullus, do you want to join in here? I'm sure you've got some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I actually wanted to read just a paragraph from my essay, And again, I encourage everyone to read the essay. It's on my website at abnormocracy.com. The paragraph reads the following: Immorality lies at the heart of a soulless society. Our most recent decades attest to these unimaginable levels of decadence, avarice, and abject immorality. With a focus on themes of redemption, Imperium art cleanses subversive elements of materialism and nihilism, which led to our current decay. This is the way of Imperium art, by presenting alternatives to the superficial tolerance of liberal, materialistic, and secularist subversive theories that have been inserted into our collective consciousness. Imperium art will make no excuses for immorality, which lies at the core of modernity's greatest weakness.
Amen.
Nice. I think you two should start a band, actually.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I'm always trying to go in and out from the small details to the big grand picture. And I feel that people like yourself, you are very deep and unique. You're classic artists. You feel deeply, you think deeply, highly intelligent, and you kind of operate on another level than the average person. So you make art and you communicate these complex ideas through your art, and it's bingo. I mean, that is what art is. This is exemplary. So it's a joy to have you on the show. What I'm always trying to do as an art educator is to translate this to people who maybe don't have the knowledge or capacity in some sense to process these complex ideas. And then on top of that, there's the added dimension that not everyone is Christian and not everyone shares these worldviews or values, etc. That's beyond me, though. I mean, I can't cover all that, right? So yeah, I'm just really interested in what you're doing, and it seems to me that you're offering a worldview that would be helpful, or at least add a very good structure to the Imperium Art Project and where we're headed.
Right on. Yeah. I mean, I just feel like we as Orthodox, I mean, there's plenty of problems in our church, right? But as an institution that is historical, apostolic, with an unchanging dogma and doctrine, we are that. And the historicity is what gives me the most inspiration, because we have the model. We have Byzantium. We have the most successful civilization, that lasted for 1,000 years. It didn't last forever. That's because, civilizations, they're rising and falling. That so-called cycle is a reflection of the errors that they invest in, because for the Christian, it's a straight line. We reject this cyclical return idea, and I think that the closer that a civilization is to God, the more that they will reflect that. There's clarity to a beginning and end. It's a reflection of our lives as mortals, really.
I agree. I can certainly agree with that. I'm sorry, it's just very beautiful to think about that. It really does all boil down to every individual. And I think that in some way or other, we all have to come to terms and have a relationship with God. I'm not the guy to tell everyone how to do that. I listen, and I pay attention and I work with it. But I wanted to kind of wrap up this section of the interview and by just asking you quickly, what would be your advice to artists who are trying to, say, artists on the right wing in general, and certainly artists who are savvy to white identity politics, essentially people that could be making Imperium art? What sort of advice might you offer them?
Well, I'd say that be willing to make sacrifices. It's not an easy road, and you can't have it all, you know. We if we're not willing to sacrifice our time, our convenience, and sometimes even our reputation, then we can't really accomplish what I feel God would want from us, you know. And for me, it hasn't been convenient at all. You know, when I tried to get a Tale of Two Peoples scanned at this gallery quality printer and scanner, that's close enough to me. The dude said it was anti-Semitic, you know. And I'm like, dude, I'm a Jew, man. What are you doing? And he just screwed me over. So I got a bunch of white nationalist friends to raid his Yelp account. But needless to say, I can't go back there, and I doubt I could anyways. And it's just like, you just have to be willing to take those hits. That really screwed me over, but I just have to keep going. I just have to keep going, and you just have to keep going. And you have to keep pushing, and you can't be too worried about what you're going to lose, because ultimately you're a finite being, and what's important is to do the right thing and to ask for the Lord's mercy,
So it takes courage to, first of all, that was a crazy story. I mean, that's like one of the most oddball stories of the alt-right that I could think of, and it's wonderful and funny and surreal at the same time. But I think what you're saying, though, is that it takes courage to make Imperium art, or to make art for the right-wing white identity politics. Everything that's pro-Western civilization is pro-white. Let's agree on that. If all the Tibetans disappear in the world, then Tibetan culture goes with them. Well, the same thing for Europeans and European culture. So it's something else. Yeah. So let's change the conversation over a little bit. I wanted to get your impressions on the concept of Imperium art. And I believe you watched the show with Jeff Winston, of the creator of the White Art Collective.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
Oh, just like I said earlier, I think that actually providing structure for this and moving forward with it is the most necessary thing. A degree of collectivization is absolutely necessary to get anything done in the world. So and when you're dealing with the world of art, and especially on the right wing, well, there's two things working against you there, because you have individual-minded people on the right to begin with, and artists themselves can be very hard-headed and stubborn. So I definitely salute dude for putting this together. Putting what he's and initiating it. That's a lot of times that's just the hardest thing to do, is to get shit started.
Oh God, yeah. Well, the White Art Collective has been an amazing blessing for all of us. Really gave us a home, and it's a true sense of family. I always add the White Art Collective link below our shows as well, and of course urge everybody to enjoy their shows. Nullus's poetry cast on every other Sunday is phenomenal, very, very high quality. I guess I'm wondering if you might come on and do some. I shouldn't ask that question. That's Nullus's show. But there's so much to say about it. As far as like any challenges, what do you think the challenges that we'll face trying to create Imperium art and moving forward with white identity art?
Fuck. What haven't you already seen? I just would expect more of the same, to be honest. More deplatforming, more censorship, and attempts to marginalize and whatnot. But you just have to be. We have to be clever and mutable and adaptable in this environment. I'm not enough that way, even though I say it. But we can't be attached to specific platforms where we already have established audiences. We have to branch out, and it takes work. And I don't do it enough, but I should. and
Mhm.
hopefully change that habit. But it's just something that we have to do.
Yeah.
You have to
What
be as diverse as possible.
what do you think would make the White Art Collective or Imperium art more palatable to the mainstream audience?
Well, couching it in Orthodox Christianity would be great. um, but,
There you go. Okay.
but see, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but at the same time, it's like it's not wrong because you know there's a lot of the people that are converting to Orthodoxy are coming from many different avenues,
Mm,
and many of them are white, in America,
sure.
and there is inherent defense of Christians in the faith. It's not about cucking and rolling over. Like I said, we have saints that are emperors, soldiers, warriors that have died on battlefields, in
Well,
Pyrrhic victories by the tens of thousands.
wow.
Um, so I mean, like, uh, I I I don't want to be Mr. Evangelist, but in a certain way, there's no way around it for me because it is a worldview,
Yeah.
and there is certainly I'm getting as much defense. I'm getting my need for justice served
Mm,
as being an Orthodox as I got dealing with all of the fascists and National Socialists, but it's without baggage. It's pure and crystalline,
I see.
and it applies to those with their mind right, with the proper character, with the proper humility before the Lord. And that's how I will judge my fellow man, by how humble they are towards the Lord, and that will reflect in how they treat me, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
This is some powerful stuff. I think we can't in white identity politics, regardless of the fact that we're constantly being brutalized, and the whole white genocide agenda, we still have to maintain a kind of a loving heart, a spiritual mentality, and it's hard. It's very, very hard to do, but I feel that if we don't do it, we'll perish. That we've got to maintain some level of, like Nietzsche said, if you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back into you. And we don't want, or if you fight monsters, you become a monster. We don't want to do that. You're just talking about the baggage of people who are into fascism or National Socialism. These political ideologies evolved in defense of communism to
Mhm.
protect and preserve the indigenous cultures of Europe. And, as such, there's blah, blah, blah. We can go off on a tangent. So it's a dichotomy, though. You have an aggressor who's coming to destroy your identity, your freedoms, your family, the whole deal. And, so we cling to those ideologies with a kind of a life and death passion. But
Yeah.
that dichotomy, though, is in a sense that's the cyclical existence of suffering and constant war. And, how can we break out of that? And so it seems like,
And that's what Christianity, well, that's what Orthodoxy rejects. In our rejection, the inherent in our theology is the rejection of the dialectic of what you speak. And
Mhm.
that's the kosher sandwich that the fascists love to cite so much, is exactly the dialectic itself, the political dialectic. And the third position, to me, is properly seen as a kind of a radical centrism between those two dialectics. And as far as I'm concerned, dialectical politics is the Jewish wheelhouse, because it's
Yeah.
it's built upon a rejection of the Lord. It's built upon a rejection of God's law and
Okay.
of God, of holy civics.
Mm,
Where the church and state is one, and
mm.
well, not one, but in harmony.
Uh,
And we call it symphonia in
mhm.
the East. The symphony, the harmony that the church and the state can make when they are operating properly together,
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
and
So do you think that there could be a fascist or a National Socialist manifestation of Orthodox Christianity? Could they somehow work together?
yeah, Corandro, Coran, I can't remember the dude, the Romanian fascist. probably the closest thing to that Corandro.
I'll look it up. I know who you're referring to, but I don't speak Romanian, so I've got a problem there.
Well, he that's probably the closest that you see, but the issue is that it's, for me, it's the ideology that's an issue. It's putting the cart before the horse. The ideologies themselves, the political dialectic, came out of the ashes of Christian monarchies. They rose from that ashes. So trying to combine them, for me, is not something that I feel like I need to do. To me, it's unnecessary, because the model is provided holistically within the faith and within our history of how we affect civilizations. So, but I understand the reaction. It's just predictable, and that's how Jews were able to dismantle the alt-right. See, before I was converted, I thought the alt-right was on a road to victory.
Yeah,
because they simply had the truth on their side, at least to a certain degree. Sure. They had the truth on their side, and they had a lot of passion. And we saw them systematically dismantled by the establishment. And from what I recognize now, it wasn't simply the weight of the establishment coming down on them. It was also errors in their metaphysics that allowed for them to be destroyed as effectively as they were. But I mean, I know some people would disagree with that, but I can elaborate. But this is probably not the show for that. But
I would like you to just at least say, at least give us one example of an error in their metaphysics.
I think that because they're putting flesh before the Lord. Tribalism is when it becomes an ism is when it becomes idolatry. Seeking to defend your tribe is normalcy. It's like an extension of your family. Yeah. But creating a system of metaphysics around that flesh, that you start to enter the wheelhouse of the Jews that have done that for 2,000 years, and they're way better at you than that. They've taken over civilizations with that mentality, and that's specifically because they were the first ones to reject God, reject our Lord. And Judaism was then innovated. Rabbinical Judaism was innovated post Christianity, post the Messiah, post his resurrection. So, I mean, what I say to the fascists is that they are behaving spiritually as Jews, and in that state of mind, you will be a pawn, you'll be predictable, and you'll be destroyed, and Jews have proven that they can do this quite effectively. And the reason why they've been able to so effectively take over America is because the rebellious spirit of America is more harmonious with where they are to begin with. Even though we were founded by Protestants and whatnot, people that believed in Christ, the system of our government where we disperse power is antithetical to the monarchical system that is closest to the Lord's order, on earth.
To kind of be the devil's advocate here, one of the biggest criticisms in the alt-right or the dissident right is that Christianity is deracinated, that there's no race, whereas, like I said, the Jews are a race, I guess I'm not defending that so much as I'm acknowledging that, yeah, it's obviously true, but how does that relate to everything? So, like, people who are against Christianity within the dissident right would say, don't be Christian because it's deracinated, and we have to, protect our people, and et cetera. And so it's very hard for me to counter that. I don't have a counter for that. So, but yet at the same, let me just finish my point real quick. At the same time, I completely align with the spirituality that you're talking about as the core answer. So the question then becomes, is there a white God? Is there a European God? Is there, I know this is I know pretty much what you're going to say, but it's, again, I'm not so much challenging you as I'm trying to ask questions for the listeners.
No, you, because this is where they're at right now. And but this is when I say that I didn't account for the metaphysical ineptitude of the alt-right when I thought that they would actually be victorious, and that's because I was metaphysically inept at that point myself. But the counter is that you should be more concerned about your soul rather than your flesh, because there's a consequence for our actions that is eternal. And they may reject that, but they're going to have to find their motivations in the world, and the world is a place full of deceptions, and games. And
while I agree with that, there's the question about your children and your children's children. In a sense, to just care about your soul is individualism in a way.
Well, I'm not just saying yours, but I'm saying care about the souls of people, your own included. Your family. You'd be more concerned about your children's soul than for their flesh.
Right. So there could be the answer then, is if we make it, if somehow we're able to kind of mix these two and, make the souls of our children our top priority, so that, the 14 words, that provide. Go ahead.
If I can just quickly interject, there's a lot to unravel with everything that's been said. And I think that we definitely have to look at this as a battle on different planes. You have the material plane, that's the battle that we see. You have the spiritual, metaphysical battle, which is both the internal struggle that you have your own demons in your own life, but also the struggle of the soul through any kind of manipulation or subversion that takes you down a very dark path, which can be also societal. And there is a societal soul in the sense that we do belong in unity with God. So I do agree with that. Although, I mean, on certain nuances, I'm sure that we will not agree. I mean, my Roman Catholic position probably would have a different interpretation on certain things. But I think in the overall context, I have to agree that we do have a responsibility to care for our souls. But I think the answer to this is the word, a simple word, is the word love. And what I mean by that is that when we work from the motivation of love, then we are loving our family, we love ourselves, and not in the narcissistic way, but we love ourselves, that we respect ourselves, we love our family, we love our neighbors, and traditionally our neighbors were our extended family, our ethnos, our race is our extended family. In this postmodern world, a lot of these concepts have been changed, so it becomes a little bit more complicated and muddied. But I believe that you do have a responsibility toward your people. I think that my nationalism, my love of my nation, is only second to my love of God. So I look at that as a symbiotic relationship, that I need to have both to be healthy. I need to have both of them to be working toward a general good. I don't subscribe to saying that I would want to have some kind of excuse or use Christianity. And I think that we have to be very careful, because Christianity has been also, to a lesser or a greater extent, depending on how we look at it, has been also weaponized against us through the dialectic, actually. So we're in a position now where we have to define ourselves along our nation, our race, our identity, our culture, and also our spirituality. So I do think that Christianity is definitely an overarching theme for the soul of not just the soul of the European man, the soul of man, but understanding it from the context of the soul of the European man. I think that would be a better way of putting it. I would say that what we really need to focus on is not ourselves for ourselves, but focusing on ourselves for others. And then when we understand it in that context, it becomes not an individualist, selfish, egotistical approach. It would become more of an understanding of humility, an understanding of my relationship to something that's greater than I am. And it also gives us a kind of zeal that does not exist in this world today. And I think that Jonathan hit the nail on the head with the deconstruction through various forms of isms that try to replace religion. and faith. And I don't even want to say religion, because religion is just basically a placeholder. I think faith is the most important word here. And so what we have to say to ourselves is that my nationality, my race, my ethnos is an integral part of who I am, and who I am is something that was given to me by God, and that's something that I have to respect.
Amen.
So I need to defend both of them.
Yeah, I mean, because we were made in his image, so how we are in our ethnos is his will. So things that seek to annihilate ethnos is not Christian at all. It's demonic. So
exactly.
But that's represented in the Orthodox Church. Like we don't have a blob like belief system that seeks to annihilate the characters of the different people that adopt it. That's not what happens.
Right.
We have these churches that are identified by their nations. Even when they migrate to other nations, they keep that identity, but that it's not to exclude others, but it's to let you know where they are coming from. Right. Because otherwise, how would you understand their catalog of saints? How would you understand the saints that church has produced? Came from a specific place, and yeah, I mean, I think that we can't really love without loving God. I think that once we develop a relationship with the Lord, then I mean, it's so profound that you can't help but deepen your relationship to those that you love already, and Christianity certainly has been weaponized, but that's why the Orthodox Church is not Protestant. It's not Roman Catholic. We're not perfect, but we do not have the evolution of dogma. They tried to annihilate our most powerful church, the de facto inheritor of Byzantium, the Russian Orthodox Church. They attempted to destroy them but with their atheist empire in the 20th century, and yet the Russian church stands today the most powerful on earth. So nothing can destroy us ultimately, even though we will be challenged, even though we have challenges right now with clergy that are bowing to these COVID lockdowns. And that is incredibly egregious and scandalous. So we have our problems. We have a doctrinal warfare system being waged against our patriarchates on different parts of the world right now, where the CIA is doing their business, So there's no such thing as a perfect church on earth. But I do feel like we have the solutions that the white identitarians are seeking, because our solutions are multidimensional. It's a world. It will change your life to give us to look at our apologetics, to look at our arguments against the pagans and against the other heterodox churches, and to see where we're coming from, because it convinced me, man. I mean, specifically, it's the man Jay Dyer. He's the most prolific apologist that we have right now. And I gave his arguments a listen, and it ended up being the catalyst for my conversion. So I'd encourage people to just check out what we have to say.
Sure. Yeah, I'm extremely pleased to have you on the show. We really needed some representation for these ideas, and I would really say this is just the start of the conversation. I hope that you would join us again sometime. And even go deeper into looking at your religious paintings. They're exquisite. Everybody should go to the site below. I'll, of course, include John's link below. I want to, again, thank you so much. And also thank you to Nullus for bringing your perspective and your wisdom to this conversation. This is a extremely deep and extremely important topic, something that I don't think gets enough time. People are kind of locked up in their little camps, and we're not talking to each other. And we call ourselves a movement, but we don't come to table. And I think the Imperium Art Show is one of the few shows where we try to, give the mic to everybody and let it go around. So it's been an absolute pleasure, Jonathan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, so please leave your comments below. Please share and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode of Imperium Art.